Most of the time, when people talk about the origins of economic thought, they jump straight to the usual names: Adam Smith, Karl Marx, maybe Aristotle if they paid attention in school. But there's a quieter truth hiding much further back, one that Western history almost never talks about. Nearly 1,000 years ago, long before capitalism, stock markets, or central banks, a Muslim scholar issued a warning that still echoes through every financial crisis we live through today. He said that when money loses its moral compass, societies don't just struggle, they rot from the inside. And looking at the world we live in now, it's hard not to wonder if he understood us better than we understand ourselves. Welcome to the Capital Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To understand Al-Ghazali, one of the most influential thinkers of the Islamic Golden Age, you have to imagine a world that feels both familiar and completely foreign. It's around the year 1100. Europe is fragmented, poor, and unstable, still crawling out of the wreckage of the early Middle Ages. But the Islamic world tells a very different story. It stretches from Al-Andalus in Spain all the way to Persia and beyond. Its cities are wealthy, crowded, sophisticated: Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo. These aren't just cultural centers, they're financial and intellectual powerhouses. Trade routes pulse with caravans carrying silk, spices, textiles, and silver. Markets are busy. Scholars debate law, philosophy, medicine, astronomy. Wealth is flowing, and it's reshaping society faster than anyone can fully understand. And in the middle of this booming world, a scholar named Abu Hamid al-Ghazali emerges. He wasn't just one thing. He was a philosopher, a jurist, a theologian, and a critic of his own society. Think of him as someone who could explain the purpose of the human soul and the purpose of money without missing a beat. Born in 1058 in Persia, Al-Ghazali rose quickly through the intellectual ranks. By his mid-30s, he held one of the most prestigious teaching positions in the Islamic world. But what made him truly dangerous wasn't his status. It was his refusal to accept what everyone else took for granted. He looked around and saw society getting richer, markets expanding, commerce exploding, and yet something felt deeply wrong. An economy thriving on the surface, but decaying underneath. A culture obsessed with wealth, but drifting away from meaning. You don't have to try very hard to see the modern parallel. Al-Ghazali began asking a question that very few people dared to ask. What happens when a civilization becomes rich faster than it becomes wise? And to answer that, he turned his attention to something most thinkers ignored: money itself. This is where many modern viewers are surprised. Al-Ghazali wasn't just a religious thinker. He was one of the earliest philosophers to analyze money in moral and systemic terms. Where later economists would focus on numbers and models, Al-Ghazali focused on psychology, on behavior, on incentives, on trust, on how money quietly reshapes societies and eventually determines their fate. At its core, he believed money was never meant to be worshipped, hoarded, or used as a status symbol. It was a tool, nothing more. He compared money to a mirror. A mirror has no value by itself. Its worth comes from what it reflects. Money works the same way. Its power doesn't come from gold or silver. It comes from what it allows people to exchange, build, and cooperate on. Modern economists love to claim this idea. But Al-Ghazali was writing it in the 11th century, when much of Europe still saw wealth mainly as land or loot. And from this foundation came one of his most powerful insights: hoarded money is dead money. To him, wealth locked away in chests, buried in courtyards, or hidden behind walls wasn't just unproductive, it was dangerous. Money that doesn't circulate doesn't feed workers. It doesn't support trade, it doesn't strengthen families, it chokes the economy. He described hoarding as freezing the bloodstream of society, a line that could be dropped straight into any modern critique of inequality. But he wasn't simply complaining about greed. His argument was systemic. When the wealthy hoard money, scarcity is created. Not because resources are missing, but because circulation is blocked. Prices distort, markets break, ordinary people suffer. That leads to another of his major warnings: speculation destroys trust. Al-Ghazali had no patience for merchants who manipulated prices, created artificial shortages, or profited from crises. He didn't see that behavior as clever, he saw it as corruption. Profit without contribution. Whoever profits from the suffering of others, he wrote, Profits from corruption. And corruption, in his view, spreads. Once it enters the market, it infects institutions, then culture, then the entire society. If this sounds like a description of modern bubbles, predatory lending, or crisis profiteering, that's because it is. Just written 900 years earlier. Still, Al-Ghazali wasn't anti-profit. He wasn't anti-trade. He believed markets were natural and necessary. What he opposed was dishonest trade, cheating, false weights, hiding defects, manipulating information. Because markets only function when people trust each other, and once trust collapses, the economy follows. In that sense, Al-Ghazali anticipated ideas modern economists would later label as information asymmetry, moral hazard, and transaction costs, just without the technical language. He also placed enormous value on labor. Work to him was dignified. Unearned wealth was dangerous. Money earned through effort built character. Money gained through manipulation eroded it. This wasn't just moralizing, it was practical. Societies grow strong when people contribute. They grow weak when people exploit. And his criticism didn't stop with individuals. He also issued one of the earliest and sharpest warnings about state manipulation of money. Medieval rulers often diluted gold or silver coins to stretch their budgets, a stealth tax through inflation. Al-Ghazali called this exactly what it was: theft. Debasing currency destroyed trust. It punished the poor first, and it destabilized the entire market. He believed rulers had a role in protecting fair markets, but not in manipulating them for short-term gain. Unjust rulers, he warned, destroy prosperity faster than any foreign enemy. And once again, the modern parallel doesn't need explaining. Al-Ghazali didn't write these ideas in isolation. He was watching real states do exactly what states still do today: raising taxes until they break people, manipulating currency to cover deficits, borrowing recklessly and passing the consequences forward. And in his view, none of it solved the real problem. Corruption at the top spreads downward. When rulers cheat their people, merchants cheat customers. When institutions abandon integrity, individuals stop acting responsibly. The entire system, from palace treasury to market stall, becomes a chain reaction of distrust. His conclusion was simple but brutal. A society can survive poverty. It cannot survive corruption. Economic collapse isn't about running out of money. It's about the breakdown of trust, the invisible glue behind every contract, currency, and institution. When trust erodes, even the richest society becomes fragile. That's why his views on currency were so uncompromising. To Al-Ghazali, stability depended entirely on honesty. Debasing money wasn't clever policy, it was betrayal. And he predicted something remarkable. If rulers manipulate currency too often, people will abandon it and turn to stronger, foreign money instead. 1,000 years later, we've watched this play out again and again. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina. Whenever belief in money dies, the system follows. Because money at its core is a belief system, and when people stop believing, nothing works. But Al-Ghazali went even deeper. He understood human nature. People hoard out of fear, speculate out of greed, cheat when they think they won't be caught. They manipulate money because money is easy to manipulate. And when exploitation becomes normal, collapse is already underway. You cannot fix an economy, he believed, without fixing incentives. Markets matter. Laws matter. But behind them are people, driven by fear, ambition, desire, and shortcuts. If a system rewards dishonesty, dishonesty will dominate. That's why Al-Ghazali emphasized the moral dimension of wealth, not because he was preaching, but because he understood reality. Wealth without responsibility becomes a threat to the common good. Societies thrive when people contribute more than they extract. They decay when profit is detached from purpose, and when collapse comes, everyone pays. Including the wealthy who thought they were immune. Which brings us to today. A world where money moves faster than meaning, where inequality reaches historic levels, where trust in institutions erodes year after year, where speculation is rewarded more than contribution, where bubbles inflate, burst, and return on schedule. Al-Ghazali's world and ours are separated by 1,000 years, but the problems look hauntingly similar. He would look at modern debt, financial excess, institutional decay, and say what he already said centuries ago. Where justice is lost, prosperity cannot survive. Economies don't collapse because numbers stop working. They collapse because people stop trusting each other, because incentives reward the wrong behavior, because institutions fail to uphold fairness. Al-Ghazali wasn't preaching religion. He was describing how societies actually function. Money is not a mechanical system. It is a moral ecosystem. And when that ecosystem collapses, the financial system follows. That's why his ideas matter now more than ever. Because if money becomes detached from morality, the system eventually breaks. Understanding that isn't just financial education, it's financial self-defense. History doesn't repeat. But if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. And if this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe.